Now, character designs have come a long ways over the years. These are always changing, they're always evolving. This tends to happen with technology, it's trying to meet artistic trends, and of course meet players' expectations. Of course, some of these things are good and bad, and I do feel there are a lot of problems. So we'll be addressing a list of topics I observed that are currently kind of plaguing character designs in more current kind of games. And we'll also be talking about style, which I do feel there might be a bit of an overemphasis on that in today's climate. And then we'll look at kind of bigger questions like, do we over-rely on archetypes and stereotypes in the needs of the games to get our ideas across? And if we do that, is that even a bad thing? While gameplay is the core of any video game, the first thing players often connect with is in fact the characters. They must be compelling, they must be memorable, and capture that attention and positively represent the game's identity. Strong character designs are essential for drawing players in and enhancing the overall experience. So I'll be looking to address all these topics, hopefully provide a little bit of answers, and sprinkle lots of art and design tips throughout. If you're new here, my name is Tyler Edlin. I've been a freelance concept designer for about 15 years now. I've worked on both big and small projects. Everything I say will just be from my own personal experience. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a discussion and educational video, so if you guys want to talk about any of that in the comments below, let's do so with some decency. Thank you for Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Let's get into this. So you guys are aware, especially those that are a bit older, games have come a long way. Simple characters like Mario have evolved in very subtle ways. Characters like Ryu have been going through a number of cosmetic and aesthetic changes that always appeal to his character. And then of course, characters like Lara Croft have been going over her ups and downs throughout the years as well. Usually when it comes to designing characters, it always starts with an idea. These are often a bit more vague. Maybe they are function-based. Maybe they are purely from a theme or aesthetic, but they're generalized. And the most common way we tend to kind of address these are with shapes and symbols. And that's what you're kind of seeing here on the left side with these Dragon Age character progressions. They base them off of pure shape design, which I covered largely in the last video, so definitely check that out if you missed it, as it really does serve as a primer to this one. And you just get deeper and deeper applying fundamentals. So it's basically like a funnel, right? You go from vague to specific down to the smaller details. And if you're an art student out there and looking to improve your design, then you definitely don't want to start with the details. Start with the shapes, start with the silhouettes. See the last video. And personally, when it comes to designing, I like to get things working functionally first. So that's what we did here, right? We redesigned Roka from that game Concord, which bombed pretty hard when it comes to the designs, and we made it functional. This doesn't make it the best, it doesn't make it a be-all end-all, but at least now this character, which is an aerial mobility rocket trooper, looks like a rocket trooper. And then typically from there, I would try to meet something that balances the function with the aesthetics. And that just takes lots of iteration. Character design is built usually by big teams, and it is a very iterative process. It takes many, many attempts to land on some sweet spots. But that is a question that comes up often enough with students. Should I design for aesthetics and appeal or from function? Technically, it doesn't matter what end of the spectrum you land at. Try to find some balance. That's the key. So first up today for our list of problems that I'm observing in modern character design, right? So the first one might be a lack of innovation, right? Are visual tropes and generic designs bad? Do we over-rely on sex appeal when it comes to game designs? Again, that's just meant to be an open conversation. But yeah, these are essentially curvy for curvy's sake. And depending on your target audience and your demographic, I personally don't feel that's always a terrible thing. Yes, it can lead to shallow character design, but some of these characters are, quite a bit deeper and have elaborate kind of backstories, and maybe their personality matches a reason for why they be dressed this way. Now, are we recycling the grizzled white male hero trope? Again, I love all these character designs. I think they're fun, but I think they really work with the art direction and the stories they're trying to convey. So I definitely feel these work most of the time. There's a lot of fantasy games coming out, right? Last year we had the very popular Baldur's Gate 3, which did wonderful and was highly received for like the character designs in that game. And upcoming we've got the new Dragon Age. But, you know, is it just too easy to rely on the standard kind of character tropes that come with fantasy? And I like when I can recognize dwarves and elves, and I love that pretty clear distinction between them, because that's what I associate with it. But is too much of that bad? Now here's another one, right? A lot of games are focusing too much on hyperrealism, right? Where they just try to go real for real's sake and have a lot of those really clear, gritty, realistic details, flaws and all. As a culture and an industry, do we have a fixation on this realism? And at what cost is that? Well, it kind of costs Concord a lot, we know that. But with other games as well, I feel it dilutes certain quality and artistic merits from them. Now, as technology gets better, we can of course have higher resolutions, higher polygon counts. Are we over-designing some of our classic characters? Are we just pushing detail for detail's sake, and does that make for a better design? Again, I think that's going to highly fluctuate depending on the type of game, right? In fighting games, highly detailed characters are pretty normal and standard. We can see Scorpion's costume evolve here. They don't really get overly cluttered, but they do get highly detailed, and since usually at most there's 2 characters on the screen, we're not really compromised in the functionality there. Same with a character like Tifa Lockhart from the Final Fantasy. Her modern design has actually changed very little over the course of the years. Her newest design is actually just supporting some leggings and sport bra, but I mean, no matter which version you prefer, it really goes to the functionality and the personality of her character. Master Chief has gone through a number of changes over the year himself. Again, there's been periods where he's gotten very busy and very technical, but I do love where his later designs, which harken back to the simplicity of his original models and trying to push bigger and bolder shapes. Now, what about designs that are intending to subvert cultural expectations? This is a bit of a deeper one, right? What people find appealing often shifts based on cultural context and design trends. Certain styles can become fashionable or appealing because they reflect values, technology developments, or social movements of the time. And I do feel designers need to be aware of these trends while balancing them with these more timeless principles. A style that taps into current trends can be immediately, but it can also run the risk of becoming immediately outdated as soon as something new is in the door. And this is why tried and true, ideal, and traditional standards will always work when it comes to the character designs. They rely on time-tested principles that provide clarity, functionality, and aesthetic appeal. These standards, like the use of balance, proportion, symmetry, shape, and line, create designs that are easy to understand with and engage with. This is why typically archetypes work very well. You can see here on the right, the character, I believe Cassandra from BioWare. Again, they're using very simple shape design and geometric properties and principles to bring out the characteristics of that character. And she is all about power and authority. This is why they're using a lot of triangular and very sharp shapes. Whereas these characters from Concord have gotten numerous fan redesigns already. They just proportionally are not that interesting, and they're really fundamentally flawed, and again, intentionally kind of ugly because they're trying to lower the median standards there, and nobody just wants to play as that. And this leads into a whole slew of other issues that are happening in Eastern and Western character designs, right? The West is currently challenging traditional beauty standards compared to the East, where they're upholding and idolizing these traditional beauty standards. They're trying to become the best versions of themselves in these designs. There's something to be said with striving for the value of excellence compared to just lowering it to an overall median standard. And then, for my last big problem I want to highlight here is that there are designs, of course, out there that just take themselves way too seriously, right? The DMC redesign with Dante there had to just be all edgy and cool. He was trying so hard to be cool. I don't think a lot of players found him that cool. And then there was Lightning, again, that was really forced into being like this big, strong, stoic female leader. She never talked, she wasn't interesting, and took herself really seriously. At least there was deep narrative reasons when Cloud Strife and company were doing that, back in the 90s. Then we had the redesign of the Prince in the second Prince of Persia game where he went from a fun and carefree and kind of quippy sort of prince. Everyone all liked him in the first game, Sands of Time, but on the redesign he just became so dark and gloomy. I do think there was some narrative and gameplay elements tied to that, which again gives it a pass. There's designs out there that are just taking themselves way too seriously, like basically the whole Concord cast. None of them were fun, none of them were engaging, none of them functioned. Right? The soup kitchen bouncer. Now, the developers and designers over on Concord were so committed to an ideology that was anti-heroism in a genre where they wanted to be a hero shooter, it just didn't work, right? They were actively seeking to subvert all tropes, all stereotypes, all archetypes, and when you subvert all of them, you can't meet the needs of anything in regards to the design. Right, the design is not going to work in terms of function and gameplay, the narrative is going to fall apart, and the aesthetics are not coming together because they were so fundamentally flawed. Now, the Brush Sauce crew this week quickly did a quick pass on what I called the soup kitchen bouncer, and yeah, he's a medic. And I tried to put a very kind of quick kind of take on these. Yes, these are not perfect. Yeah, there's some that are overly stereotypical here and generic, but that's fine. All we wanted to do first was, like with option A here, is get it to a point where it functions as a healer role. And so when I approach typical projects like this for clients, I always provide options that fall into one of three categories. I do want to start with something that is very safe and very functional first, right? Something that the client definitely could use either way. Then with option 2, I like to have a little bit more fun, and that's kind of what you're seeing in option B and C here. Again, thematically they're a little similar, but I would call them a little more fun, and there's something I'd personally try to lean into a little bit more if I were making all the shots. And then we have basically the soup kitchen bouncer right over on the last one. The third category is where you kind of just throw anything out there, something kind of out of left field, just to see if it sticks. Because often enough in these earlier concept phases, clients don't know what they want until they see what they don't want. So providing a sheer variety of options and themes that fit the archetype or the role of the character usually serves me pretty well. But more importantly, a lot of these issues in these modern character designs are creating problems for students looking to build their design portfolios and break into the industry. To get into the industry, you really need to be able to stand out while maintaining a sense of consistency in your quality, all while showing various studios that you could become adaptable as well to their various kinds of projects. I've mentioned previously that my fellow YouTuber Marco Bucci runs an awesome Skillshare class, and he has a new one that I think is going to interest you. Skillshare is the largest online learning community, offering a vast array of inspiring courses, all taught by working industry professionals. Whether you're a novice looking to elevate your skills or you've already got several years of experience under your belt, there's always something there for you. Skillshare provides learning pathways that can help you grow in various types of creative disciplines. So Marco has a new class called Getting Hired as an Illustrator. Fundamentals to make you more adaptable. The advice in this class, of course, is very in-depth, discussing all the important aspects of becoming relevant to our complicated and changing industry. These concepts here apply to navigating this current landscape of the art world. So not only are you going to learn about becoming adaptable, but Skillshare has project-based classes. You will be able to create portfolio work throughout this course. So go check out this class for free because Skillshare has a special offer right now where the first 500 people to use my link below will get a 1-month free trial. Whatever you are interested in learning, Skillshare has a course for you, whether it's in illustration, graphic design, social media, or more. You will find what you need here. So check out Marco Bucci's class, or maybe someone else like Hardy Followers who's got another great course on there as well. Just click the link in the description. Thanks again Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Alright, now on to topic 2. This is a big important one that I definitely wanted to address in this week's video, and that is art styles are overrated. Many young artists are obsessed with finding an art style, and it's easy to see why. It creates a lot of appeal and interest, it can make something very fun, but it could also be potentially very dangerous. Now, if you're unaware, style does refer to the visual and aesthetic characteristics when it comes to the design. Now, what people do find appealing usually refers to the emotional, cognitive, and cultural response that the design evokes. Now here's a quick, simple little chart here just to kind of show you the broad ranges of style out there. Things range from either being very simple and abstract to being completely grounded in reality. The big aspect though when it comes to style that I want you guys to take away is that the style of a character is not the ultimate objective, right? But rather a tool to achieve the larger purpose, right? So as a purpose, communication is absolutely king. Art style is used to effectively communicate the themes, emotions, and narratives here, all while pushing for the functionality aspect of it as well, right? Clarify your gameplay elements. Now, as a tool, right, support the narrative. That's clearly what it should do. Style should support the story, right? Something like Resident Evil wouldn't be nearly as scary if it had a very cartoony graphics, so it opts for high amounts of realism with the RE engine. And when used properly as a tool, it can enhance the experience, right? Creating these immersive visuals that do support these themes. And again, it's not the goal, right? This is going beyond aesthetics. Style needs to reflect the broader goals here. So you got to think about how that's going to integrate with your content as a whole. Style will bridge the story, the mechanics, and the sound design together. Just look at all these different versions and iterations on style with the character Link from The Legend of Zelda. No matter what style he is, it always coincides with the overall themes and the look and the feel of the entire game. They're always adapting and they're always shifting. That's how it works with that property. Now, the bigger problem with art styles is again, there tends to be an overemphasis on aesthetic polish over that storytelling or in some places gameplay and functionality there. Now, if we look at the game Battleborn, which was developed by Gearbox, right, it had a very vibrant, colorful art style, tons of unique character designs with very lively animations, and its visual style was praised, by every outlet. But the game still didn't do well. Let's take a moment to just praise these character designs. Credit is given where it is due here, right? These all have very clear color visual hierarchies. Everything's proportioned and reads well from a value distribution. It has very clear design fundamentals when it comes to the shape theory and implementation, right? We have one character that's very triangular, very dynamic, one that's very square and very boxy, one that's a mix of elegance, so it's using lots of triangles and circles. And then, of course, we have really dynamic proportions to make these characters feel very interesting. That's using big, medium, small variants in a large capacity here. And then, of course, more subtle things, right? Like repeating themes and repeating motifs, right? There's different parts of the characters that are essentially echoing in other parts of the features, and it works really, really well. This also does work with color. Now, Battleborn failed because it was released at the same time of Overwatch, right? It was overshadowed. Its gameplay wasn't as refined. It failed to attract that larger audience. There was confusing elements in the marketing. The game had a bit of an identity crisis. It wasn't sure whether it was a MOBA, a shooter, maybe something in between. A lot of things outside the art actually hurt its success. But if they had spent maybe less time on the art or just more time and staffed up on the gameplay and everything else, maybe it could have worked better. But either way, it is important to know your rules first, right, before you break them. If you are just arbitrarily just referencing existing styles without knowing how they got there, you're essentially skipping too many fundamentals. And this is one of the number one thing that I see all my art students tend to make. They want to emphasize style over traditional fundamentals. Yeah, sometimes the work can look good and function, but it might be just derivative at best, and at worst, it's just going to look terrible. Now, style comes from experience, problem solving, and taste. I often heard, and I do agree, stylization is drawing something the wrong way intentionally. So this is a quick little character design one of my classes challenged me to do. I was redesigning Drma from the old Sega game Skies of Arcadia, and they said, how would you do this in 3 different styles? And that really just comes from understanding the shapes that make up this character, breaking those down, and then reconstructing them with different layouts and proportions. You can kind of see that over here on the left, and then I just refined the drawing, so we basically have a more realistic version, a comic version, and then like a series for like an animated movie. So the styles just get a little bit more exaggerated as they go on. My final design just kind of ended up kind of in the middle. But again, it was all intent, and it's fun to kind of play with things once you know the rules. Now, personal preferences and subjectivity do play a role here. 2 people can have very different reactions to the same design based on their own upbringing and history. Now look at Cuphead, for example. These were characters designed in the style of the 1930s. Some players just simply found it too nostalgic or felt it disconnected from these intentionally retro aesthetics, and it just didn't resonate with everyone, especially those unfamiliar with or uninterested in that era of animation. But those who knew, and generally loved and praised it. And then, of course, we have got like Jet here, right, from Valorant, a nice stylized choice. Jet is a South Korean agent in Valorant, and it features a slick, futuristic design with a windswept hair and street-inspired clothing, but she does have an exaggerated anime-like appearance, and it's meant to reflect her quick, agile gameplay style, and it emphasized speed and finesse. And yeah, while a lot of players did like this style, others just found that it was too stereotypically anime, feeling that it leaned too much into that style over substance and didn't feel nearly as original compared to the other casts in the game. Some even criticized her as being just too cartoonish. And then we have Diva here from Overwatch, right? Which features a very bright, colorful scheme and a very overly cutesy aesthetic, and also includes a really badass mech that I think is awesome. I love this design, but it didn't land with all the players. Some just found that it was too cute, or that it was pandering to certain kind of audiences, particularly with esports and anime fandoms. Either way, designs aren't going to land with everybody. That's kind of normal. But either way, this is why designers often define a target audience to focus on who the design is really meant to appeal to, right? A style that resonates with one group may not work with another. So understanding your audience's preference is key, to create something widely appealing, especially if it needs to go to market and make sales for your company. Concord, we talked a lot about this. Didn't have an audience. Dustborn, right? It was for fans of games like Life is Strange or Oxenfree, which focus on storytelling and relationships over action. But this game focused so hard on diverse perspectives and political messages, it just did not resonate with a lot of players. They were simply just put off by these elements that were just presented in a more heavy-handed manner. In Life is Strange, they were just more nuanced, and it felt more natural for the themes and the story of the game. And then, of course, we have something like Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League. Again, it was a live service, kind of generic gameplay loop. Didn't help it a lot. The tone and characterization kind of was all over the place. It was very serious, but also very comedic and light. The characters largely landed a bit on the flatter side. Some found many of these transformations unnecessary and felt, in some cases, like with Poison Ivy, that it just completely diminished her character altogether. This was her redesign for that game on the left. This is how she looked in previous Arkham appearances. And yeah, like the game was just inconsistent. That just shows you the value of consistency when it comes to designs, especially when you're kind of part of a larger series. And then the other part of the problem with art style as a superficial element is that sometimes overshadows the deeper design aspects, right? When a character design is overly sexualized in a way that doesn't align with their personality or serve the narrative, right? It can feel out of place and very impractical. This disconnect can, of course, undermine the character's believability, making the designs feel very forced rather than organic or relevant to the narrative. And that lack of cohesion between their appearance and role can diminish the character's depth and the immersion for the audience. Tomb Raider works pretty well. She's very fit, and so it just really works with her character. That's a little different with Metal Gear and Hideo here, right? He has some really cool designs. But, right, he operates in the realism of exaggeration and character, including sex. And that's what we see here with Quiet from Metal Gear 5. She was just naked basically for the sake of it, and he made some BS lore reason. And then we have Eva here, right? She was basically the inversion of a lot of Bond girl tropes. She was playing all sides for fools. She was pursuing and seducing Snake on her terms, not on his. And she ended up taking the big legacy thing from him at the end. But she was sexualized as usual, but empowered through her sexuality. She was able to manipulate a lot of the dudes in that game. It was relevant to her story, her character, and the satire inherent to that game and the series. Alright, finally now on to topic 3, stereotypes and character design. The good and the bad. Great character design does often start with stereotypes because they offer instant familiarity and recognition, right? Using both visual and behavioral traits that audience quickly associate for specific roles or personalities. And this helps establish a character's identity very quickly, right? But it is worth noting when you are double downing and having a really clear and artistic art style and really showcasing characters that fall into very typical stereotypes, it's just going to amplify those stereotypes even further. Essentially, though, it is a tool, right? And I do feel it is essential to some degree for many games, right? And this is good because these stereotypes create immediate emotional connection with us, the audience and player. The issues tend to come around when characters are designed purely for visual appeal. The stereotypes remain unchallenged. Link representing the classic hero, both youthful, athletic build, portraying a silent, courageous warrior, and his design reflects that of a young, unassuming hero destined for greatness. Zelda embodies that whole damsel in distress, that wise princess stereotype, though she evolved over time and she's getting her own game coming out later this month. Her design often emphasizes beauty and grace, typically associated as well with traditional femininity. And then we have Ganon, who is our typical evil overlord type, and he represents a very large and imposing physical and monstrous forms in many cases, highlighting the brute strength and malevolence in his character. I love all that, and I'm there for it. And at this stage, I also just wanted to briefly mention archetypes, as both archetypes and stereotypes, though they are different, will draw from an overly simplified representation of a type of character. They draw from broad generalizations and universal themes, and often provide a certain level of predictability, as we see with the Zelda references. There are many types of archetypes in character designs and with character designs and with game characters. It's just good to balance how you're integrating them. We mentioned earlier on in the video that shape designs often serve as the foundation of character designs, which we build our silhouettes from. These shapes are often built into archetypes and from those stereotypes. That's why it's important to be aware of them, and that way you can intently choose whether to lean into them or just try to subvert them. Now, with great character designs, though, I do feel one of the best things about them is that they know how to subvert these stereotypes and these archetypes. This is going to make the characters feel deeper, it's going to have them be more nuanced, and go beyond those simple initial impressions. By blending recognizable tropes with unique features, right, designers can create characters that are both accessible and memorable, while avoiding overly flat or simplistic portrayals. Look at Ellie from The Last of Us, breaks the typical damsel stereotype, right, being both a vulnerable teenager and a fierce survivor. Then we have Barrett Wallace from Final Fantasy VII. He's one of my favorite characters. He seems like a typical kind of angry black man stereotype with exaggerated aggression and a very muscular physique. But those who've played the game know he is so much deeper, he is so much more nuanced than that.
I'm sorry, honey. I wish I didn't have to.
And it shows a vulnerability and guilt over his past. His scenes can make people tear up. They're very powerful. And then we got Gordon Freeman, right, from Half-Life. He's a quiet intellectual scientist, and he becomes an unlikely hero. He subverts the stereotype of that loud, macho action protagonist. And then we have Bayonetta. She subverts a lot of the sexy female tropes and archetypes by being a powerful lead, extremely confident, unapologetically sexual, but she owns it as a form of empowerment, not objectification. Unlike the stoic or overly serious female heroes like Lightning, Bayonetta uses humor, wit, while adding a unique personality to her power. Ones that specifically try to dismantle traditional beauty standards, right? We already looked at that with a lot of Western developed AAA games. Then we have the typical token diversity and that over excessiveness of political correctness in a character design, right? From Dustborn to Concord to the upcoming Assassin's Creed Shadows. The moment you make a political identity the core establishing trait of the character, it's immediately going to clash with an established norm. And that's going to cause a lot of friction with the audience. We've already seen Concord do that. Then we have a game like Dustborn here that absolutely amazes me because they were so focused on hitting all these checkboxes, but they were hitting the wrong checkboxes. Number 1, is the character aesthetically engaging? Number 2, is the function and the gameplay tied together? The design should fit the character's role in the story. This really needed to be about making the characters about who they are, not what they are. And then we have characters that are just too one note or overly simple because they do rely on just the basics and don't try to subvert anything at all. Yeah, so there's a lot going on in the design of characters nowadays in modern games. Some good, some not as good. Style and appeal are always going to be kind of closely related and represent different aspects of design. Style is a designer's toolkit that creates visual identity and communicates meaning, while representing the viewer's response to that visual experience. A design's success often does hinge on whether or not the designer can use that style to evoke the right feeling and emotional sort of response from that viewer, and ensuring that not only does it look good, but it feels right. And at the end of the day, I just personally feel there needs to be balance with visual appeal, not being overly shallow in stereotypes. But if you're a young and inspiring designer, just learn your fundamentals. Just focus on what your project needs. Try to plan as much as you can. Heck, look at how my character designs have shifted and changed over the years. I used to have a lot more time on my hand. I used to think I had to do a lot more realistic characters, and over time they kind of got simpler and simpler and simpler. A, because I'm trying to problem solve because I don't have the hours that I used to, so I'm trying to find shorthand ways to kind of communicate designs without excessive details, and I find them more fun. At the end of the day, if you do something that you enjoy, you put some passion into it, as well as try to factor in what you're trying to solve with that design, that'll lead you down a good path. Guys, let me know what you think below. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love on what kind of topics you'd love to hear me talk about next. We're going to shift things up in the upcoming videos. I think we're going to have some Fundamental Fridays. I might do an updated office tour. But yeah, in terms of these kinds of topics, I'd love to know what to cover next for you guys. Don't forget, in the link comment, I do have a Skillshare promo code. Take advantage of 30 days for free. I'll catch you guys next time.